Hey, welcome to another stream. I thought today we could have some fun. Um, so one of the things that I used to use quite a while ago, was something called GraphQL bin. It was kind of built into GraphQL Playground. If you look on the repo here, there's like a little share button there, and when you scroll down, how does GraphQL bin work? Basically, it was like Pastebin. You could just throw in your query, you could click share, and you could get a mutable URL. And when someone visited that URL, they could run that query, and it would include, in this case, it would include the tabs and the headers and all of the history. What I want to do is just to take the very bare bones approach to this and use Graphical and add a button in there to share as well. And then we'll store all of that data with GraphCMS. So the idea here really is to demonstrate how you can use GraphCMS is a little bit more than a content management system. You can use it as a data warehouse, or something to store all of your content. In this case, our content will be our GraphQL bins, or the paste bins, or however you want to refer to them. So yeah, I thought this was really cool. Way back when, there's many times where I've wanted to share just a query, a URL, and get on with it, and let someone kind of just open that up and run the queries. But unfortunately, this doesn't no longer work, and I haven't found anything that is, has the equivalent. So I've just kind of been pasting a URL with the query string query. And the problem with this is obviously that gets too long, and it doesn't include things like the authentication or the endpoint. It's kind of got to be the hosted endpoint. And so yeah, what do we do? So let's just have a bit of fun. Let's use Next.js, GraphQL as a backend, and we'll build this thing out. So I've signed up to GraphCMS. Believe it or not, I have an account already. Well, let's just call this graphical bin. It doesn't really matter what it's called, but we're going to have a bit of fun here. Then we'll create a project. And while that's booting up, what I'm going to do is going to install Next.js and get all that fun stuff running up. So I don't need to invite anybody to the team, but we will go ahead and create a model. We could create this now. We only need to create it and forget about it, I guess. So the things that we will create will be bins. We'll create a model for that. And we will say, let's have a single line text, and we'll say that this is the end point. And validations is that is required. And then multi-line text, we will say this is the, could we call this data? I don't know. I kind of want to use JSON, but we'll stick with strings for now. Data, do we need anything else? Maybe it's variables? So we'll create some variables in here as well. So I'm not going to take this too seriously. We're just going to kind of go through this, try and create something remotely to what GraphQL Playground had. Now I know what we're about to do today using Graphical. Graphical is going to go through a bit of a change with the new version that will be coming, and that really allows you to plug in a lot more, theme it, and do some things inside of Graphical. So if you're watching this video back in, say 6 months or 9 months time, the likelihood is there'll be a better way to do what I'm about to do today. You haven't got to re-implement all of the logic that you have to do with Graphical. I haven't found it's a way to kind of inherit like these buttons, for example, the prettify, merge, copy, history. You've kind of got to add those to the toolbar again and call the functions. So I've not found a way to kind of inherit that behavior, but the new version, I'm guessing, will include the ability to kind of just add a button in there that kind of does some prescribed logic. And GraphQL Playground is going to get merged into GraphQL, into Graphical, from what I gather. So back to GraphCMS, we have everything set up for our model. We don't need anything more than that. We need the endpoint, the data, and the variables. Maybe we include the headers. Maybe we do that in a different part. Let's just try and get the bare bones going here. So inside of my terminal, I am just going to run npm init-y, and then I'm going to install, we'll install Next, React DOM. Doing this manually because every time I use create next app, I go and delete everything again. So just kind of pointless for what I'm going to be doing anyway. We'll include GraphQL request and GraphQL itself. We don't need to import any fetch libraries because Next.js will take care of that for us. And then we'll include something called a valid URL. Oh, and importantly, we need Graphical itself. How can I forget? We need that. So we've got a few people watching the stream. If you've got any questions on what we're doing here, you're new to GraphQL, or you're just watching because, I don't know, you sat on the loo or something, ask away. Ask whatever questions you got, and I'll try and cover them in here. But this is mainly just me messing around using Graph CMS as a backend for something other than content. You know, what you may find in, you know, the typical way you might use a CMS. We're going to kind of use Graph CMS for the powers it can control. So I'll stop waffling on, and we'll go into here and we'll add some scripts. So at the moment we will use dev, which is it next dev? What's next? I can't remember. Maybe this next dev. I really can't remember if that's a thing or not. Build. We'll do next build. And we'll do start, which is next. Using a different keyboard, so I can't type correctly. We've got everything installed. Now let's go ahead and create the all-important index page. And this index page will, of course, what we're going to do here. Let's first of all import React, and I'll tell you why I'm going to do that, because we are going to use effect and use state. So I'm just going to import React and call it on that. Next, we'll import GQL helper from GraphQL request, and we will also need, maybe we need raw request from GraphQL request. And then we're going to need to create a query to get our bin. How should we do this? So say the index page is going to render some kind of input form. Which then returns the you know, this returns an input form. Once you capture the input of the endpoint, it will then open up that I don't know, it opens up Graphical with the endpoint, and then if somebody goes to / an ID, that would be a Graph CMS ID. Yeah, we can capture that. So let's first of all create the index page with Graphical, then we can move on to fetching it from Graph CMS. So let's create an export default function. We'll call this index page, and let's return. We want to return Graphical, but I can already sense that we are going to need to abstract the way Graphical works, because it's probably going to be used. I know for a fact it's going to be used in 2 different pages, one with the ID and one without. So let's create a custom Graphical component from the components directory we don't yet have, but that will be custom Graphical. And then inside of here, I'm jumping all around the place. This is really bad teaching of me, but this is where my brain's going right now. We are thinking about everything at 100 miles an hour because I've got no idea what I'm doing. But we will say React use state. And the initial state is just nothing. Then this one will be valid and set valid. Now this is going to be false, right? We don't have a valid URL to begin with, and we also need submitted, perhaps. Set submitted, and that will be false by default. So if we are not submitted, then what we want to do is we want to return an input, a capture for the endpoint, don't we? That's what we want to do. So let's do form on submit. That will call. We'll just create this function here for now. We'll do prevent default because that's not taking care of us care of for us. We'll say set submitted to true. And then we will add an input. We'll give this type of URL. We'll give it an ID of URL. Not that it matters for this. We'll say the placeholder will be your GraphQL endpoint. And we'll say the value will be, we'll control this value, and then we'll say on change will be, we'll destructure from target the value. Then we'll say this is set endpoint, which is a value. So that looks fine. So I think audio levels are good. I can't see any comments at the moment through StreamYard, so hopefully sound's coming out of this mic, like the last few times we've done this. And then we'll have a button. And we'll say the button type is of submit. And we'll just say go. Now we do want to disable this button. Should we just not show it? Let's disable it. So, I don't know. Let's just say we will disable the button if this is not valid. Valid up here is set to false. Let's go ahead and just quickly create this component. And we'll say export default function custom graphical. Hello. And I've noticed that I've put the index file in the root, and it should be inside of pages. And we should be good there. And we'll say the endpoint is endpoint. And then over here, why don't we just destructure that and display the endpoint here, so we know that that's hooked up. Now there's no way to set this as valid just yet, so what we'll need to do is, what will we do? We don't particularly need to submit the form. Submitting the form is just going to set it to valid. And if it's, we can just infer the behavior based on submitting the form. You can only submit the form if the form is valid. So then once it is valid, we can do whatever we need to do to just, once it's valid, and there is, it's set to submitted. We couldn't submit the form as it stands because it's not valid. So let's just say that the form can be submitted once it's passed that validation. And then if all of that's true, submitted will be false, will be true, and it will display the custom graphical with our endpoint. So we don't need to kind of call anything here like handle submit or anything, because we're just going to kind of handle that in here. So let's do react.useEffect, and we'll say that this, I don't know what we'll call this, endpoint. Yeah, we'll pass endpoint in as a dependency there. And then we'll create an asynchronous function inside of here. We'll call this, I don't know, check endpoint. Then we'll pass in the endpoint. So here we'll do check endpoint, and we'll pass that endpoint in. And maybe we should kind of debounce or throttle or do something here with that. But for now, MVP. Let's just get this going, and we will try. Well, first of all, let's import is URI from valid URL. If it is, this is kind of okay. I think all this is doing is checking. It starts with HTTPS/S. If it does, what we're going to do is we want to try and make a request to our backend. But we're going to call it raw request because that's going to give us the status, the body, anything before kind of it's, the magic's taken care of, so to speak. This is going to give us the raw request. We could just use fetch, but I really I'm too lazy. I don't want to pass in the endpoint and then go through the hassle of passing in the method as post and the headers as application accept, etc. We don't need to do that when this library's got it kind of baked in. Raw request is kind of just a little bit above that, and it'll kind of handle that. So we'll do raw request there. Let's destructure the status. I've used this before, so I know that returns status from what I remember. And then we'll set valid if the status is, I don't know, less than, well, I don't want to say equal to 201 or 200. It wouldn't be 201, it would be 200. But should we do 500 or 400? Let's just do 400. We'll set it valid if it's better than that. Set valid to false. I'm not 100% sure if we need to catch and set this to valid, this valid value to false. I'm not sure if we need to do that, but we will for good measure, just in case someone changes the URL and it's no longer valid. We obviously don't want the user to be able to submit that URL and use it as an endpoint. So we need this query next. I will use the GQL tag, and that just helps us out a little bit with syntax highlighting. And we need to make a GraphQL query. Now, if I open up the browser and we head on over to here, a little bit about introspection. We can just run a query, and if we get if we get greater than less than a 400, if we pass this query, then we know we've got a valid GraphQL endpoint. Introspection is enabled. We're able to kind of make it doesn't even have to be enabled. We can just make this query and the query returns of success. So we could just do that. Let's just do something like, return the types or something, or the query kind or something like that. So we'll make a request to schema, and then this will be query type, and we'll say kind. I'm going to check that this actually works. Not with that API, I'll use GraphiQL. So we'll go over here and we will just try this out. Yeah, so we get a response back from our endpoint, which is good, which is good. Where are we at? Let me just check raw request again. Oh, I had it open already. I was looking at it before. So where is it? The request method will return data or errors key from the response. If you need to access the extensions, you can use raw request. So we get extensions, headers, status. That's what we need. Good, and then we just pass the endpoint and query. Okay. I think we're good. I think we are good. Let's fire this up. We'll do npm run dev. That's running, and we'll refresh here. Sweet, we've got an input. Oh, cool. So you can see now in here we have some non-valid requests, but that's not set to true yet. We can figure that out. So this is a 200. We get a response. Get a response back. So that's working. It's making the request with raw request. Maybe we're not getting the status. Console.log. Whoops. We'll set the status here. So it's disabled if it's not valid, which seems okay. And we display the form if it is not submitted. Yep, looks okay. Check endpoint, pass the endpoint in. Cool. Console log. I'm getting to 200. Oh, there we go. So it is good. Then we can click go, and there we go. We get the endpoint after we click go. So there's probably something going on with the we need to add some kind of debounce there, so it is throttle kind of the request that it makes, because it's just going bang 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 to the endpoint as you type. Every keystroke is just firing a request. Probably is not not the the most optimistic way of doing that, but hey, we're streaming, we're learning, we're building, we are having fun. This is what fun looks like, kids. Right, now the fun stuff. This is where it really gets fun. So the custom graphical interface. Now then, so we'll import React because I want to use some hooks again, and for some reason I've gone off doing it this way. Importing the named exports. I just like to use that React. Although we should probably do this to future-proof ourselves, but whatever. But for some reason, I go back to doing this named import for everything else. I don't know what's going on. So then we do import graphical, the default from Graphical. Can't remember how this works, but we'll find out. We've got a function for our custom graphical. Then why don't we just return graphical? And inside of graphical, I know there's a graphical toolbar. This is the thing that you have to re-implement again. How does this work? It's a graphical button that has a label. Yep, has a label. Now we have to re-implement Prettify again. I don't know why. Title, meh. We'll just leave that. On click, it needs to run. It needs to run itself. It needs to run the function. So probably going to need to pass a ref here. We'll just say ref, and we'll do const ref equals react.useRef. And then this will be ref.current. And then what is the function name? YOLO. I cannot spell on this keyboard. I literally cannot. Index. Components graphical. Whoa. Prettify. There we go. Haha. This is what I need. Let's just copy this. Sweet. Props up to additional content. Oh. I've not seen this before. I wonder what that does. I wonder. Let's go back into here. And did we copy the toolbar? No, we didn't. What am I doing wrong here? Graphical. What? React use ref. No. Why is that purple? There's like a syntax error somewhere. Ah. Okay. We'll add those back in. Now this needs to be the ref, doesn't it? So we'll do ref.current handle toggle history, and we'll do this. That should work, he says, with no great confidence. Right. I think we should be getting somewhere at least. We should be getting somewhere. So we'll say endpoint is equal to. No, it isn't. We need a fetcher, don't we? We need a fetcher. Now, fetcher, we could use Graphql as well, I'm guessing. We'll query, and that will make a request to fetch. Endpoint. Let's just try and import request from GraphQL request. Should work. I mean, we're just passing the query along. Let's go to endpoint query. Maybe we need variables as well. And we'll do const. We'll do query. We'll do set query. And this will be React use state. I'm going to say initial query. We'll add this here. And I'm going to say initial variables as well for our variables. We'll copy this and we'll say variables here. We'll say set variables there, and we'll add this as the default value. So then the fetcher has got access to our query and also our variables. And all that's left to do is pass those to here as well. So we'll pass query, and then we'll pass variables as variables. And then we also need to do on edit query. That will give us the query. And then we'll do set query as query. And then we'll copy the same for variables. On edit variables. And will be variables. And then we'll do variables here. And I'll say variables once more. Set variables, set variables, set variables. Right, I think we're good. I think we've got things running. Graphical's in a good place. Do we need the router? At this moment in time, no. Right, let's open up the browser. Let's have a look at what we've got. Toolbar button is not defined. Of course it's not defined. Then we come here. It's going to get annoying. Maybe we can set this as state for development. Okay. Well, that doesn't look great. We need to import the CSS, don't we? Yeah. CSS, this in here. Import graphical. Please give me CSS. Graphical.css. I don't know. Awesome. Right. Well, it still looks a bit funky. So what do we got going on? We will need to make styles.css, and we'll need to do something on the body. We'll say margin is 0, padding is 0. I'm not going to go to the extent of important tailwind, although it's kind of my default. Code, we'll say it might come with the one we'll do HTML body, and I've done this 100 times already. That the first child and div ID of next. The height will be 100%. Then that should give us some room to play with. Yeah, because it's not imported. I think Next should maybe do this automatically, or at least give me the default. Like, how many times do people create this app.js page and then do the import CSS? I've done this 100 times. I'm sure everybody that does. Maybe it does, and I'm just not aware of it. But we need a custom app to import here. So we'll just copy this, export default, and we'll do import styles.css. Go back here, refresh, add in our endpoint again. Nope. Maybe we need to restart. Keep the state. Nope. I think this has worked because the margin's gone. Yeah. Cool. So invalid AST node query inspect, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Don't know what that is. Complain about. Gets a successful response. Maybe it's because we're using GraphiQL request. Yeah, it's an invalid node. I wonder what happens if we just make this. I think GraphQL request is maybe a little bit. Maybe it's raw. I mean, why do we need raw request? GraphQL queries must be strings. Is it loading the docs? Nope. So what do we need to do is we need to send the request in stringified. Let's just do fetch. I can't remember how this works exactly. I think what the problem may be is I can't remember with GraphQL request the variables in the query should just go all together. But we'll just use fetch and see how this works. We'll do this will accept application JSON, and this will be content type of application JSON as well. And then the body will be JSON.stringify. And this will be the query because it's going to send the query over. And I think the fetcher will. I think the fetcher will take into account the variables. So query here is including the variables. And then let's just do res.text just to be safe. And then we'll turn that text, if we can, we'll try and parse it. We'll do return json.parse, because it will be stringified, and then the response will need to parse that res text rendered. What am I doing? And then we'll catch error and we'll say return the text console.log error. And if we can't parse it, then something is up. Did I do this in the right place? Then we'll say catch the response, and we'll return any text there back into Graphical to the fetcher. Well, we've got the documentation now. Okay, so we can do cart ID. Hello, ID. Cool. So it's making a request. Our fetcher's connected and working. And what if we do click prettify? It's not doing anything. Haha. Okay. Copy history. So that's working. Okay. Well, I think we're making good progress. I really do. Let's now add another button. Actually, you know what? Let's have a look at this toolbar thing and see what children. What was it we had a look at? We had a look at toolbar additional content. So is this going to be inside of here? Toolbar additional content. I don't say anything. I don't know if I've done that right. Additional content as a React node. Maybe it's because we've got custom content here. That might be why. So let's just do this. Nope. Not gonna. Oh, there we go. Sweet. Okay. So that simplifies things a bit. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Toolbar additional content. I've always had to kind of rig those up again. Okay, this is really cool actually. Additional content, we will say, it has to be a React node, right? So let's do React fragment. Or we could just say this will be a graphical button that has a label of save and share. We'll also give it a title of save and share, and we'll give it a on-click as handle save. And then we will create this. So I don't think we need the ref anymore. I'm just going to comment that out because I don't think we need the ref. We'll just say down here, we'll do const handle save. Will eventually be an asynchronous function that will do something. We'll just say alert hello Jamie. And then, hey, how awesome is that? That is really good. Oh, this is so good. Before I always kind of had to hook this stuff up. I thought you had to kind of re-implement all of this logic again. So this is pretty cool. Right. Graphical button. So I'm not bothered about not being able to change the endpoint. I don't think it matters at this stage. It is a bin after all. You'll be able to save and share. We'll just say save bin. I should call it share. Save and share? I don't know. What should we name it? Naming things. Right. So I think we're good. All we need to do now is work on simplifying how... let's just check that all this works. Yep, errors come back as normal. That comes through. We'll do this. Click prettify. All of that works. It's so good. Let's remove this ref because we no longer need it. And now we need to implement this save handle save function. So let's inside of here we will we'll make a request and we'll get the response back from a fetch call, and it's going to be to an API route. It's going to be /API/save. We'll need to set the method as post. And these endpoints, I think by default have calls disabled. That's how Next works. So it doesn't really matter anyway. We'll say the content type is, of course, your good old application JSON. Should just be the default these days. And then we'll stringify that body, which will be endpoint, query, and the good old variables. That's what we've got above here. We need to save this stuff into GraphCMS. If that is good, we will get a response back, and what we need is the ID. So we can do like router.push. We'll need to invoke that hook. So we'll do const router equals use router. Then down here, we'll be able to do router.push slash ID. I don't know if we need the slash. Can't remember. We'll find out. ID. I'm going to comment that out. And we'll just do an alert of that ID. And then we'll do catch error, and we'll just put an error here. We could not save your bin. Try again. That error will probably be, yeah, we'll get a network error anyway. So if you want to find out what the error was, you should be able to see it. So now, if we go here and we open up the console, click save and share, then we get a message undefined. I guess that's because it's not a 200. Yeah, we made a request for, yeah, if it's not found, let's add that in API save. And then inside of here, what we'll do is we'll import GraphQL. We'll just import GQL and request from GraphQL request. Then we're going to need to create a query. Yes, the mutation's inside the query, but let's not concern ourselves with naming things. Now then, this is where we get to take the full power of Graph CMS. Now, not many headless CMSs give you the ability to like insert content or change the shape of the schema in any way. With Graph CMS, you can. You've got a full access to do all of that. Anything you see inside of the UI here can more or less be done with the API as well. And the important thing is creating content as well. So yeah, we can see what this looks like. If we go to the documentation and we click mutation here, all of these are automatically generated for us. And the one in particular that I'm bothered about is create bin. So that mutation takes in a data argument, takes in our data variables, and the endpoint. Now I've used the term data because query is a reserved word, obviously in the GraphQL, because that is a type itself. So we couldn't obviously save that as query there. So we can just do a little bit of magic with either aliasing or, in fact, the variable names can be named differently. So what we probably want here is a mutation, and we'll call this create bin or save. It doesn't really matter. The endpoint, which is a string, and then we'll take in the query, and we'll call this data, which will be a string that isn't required. Then we'll take in the variables, which will be, then we'll call create bin, and we'll pass that data through, and then we'll pass those variables along. So we'll say endpoint, then we'll say data. Actually, I'm going to name it query here. So we can just pass the request, the network request along. And then we'll say variables is variables. Whoops. And then we'll get back the ID. If we run this, it isn't going to work because we don't have those variables defined. However, we can add that in here. And then we can export a default function. Well, we'll just export a default function here. We'll destructure body and the response. Maybe we do some kind of try catch in here as well. Don't think it matters. It's gonna 500 on us anyway. What do we do? We'll do const create bin is the response from GraphQL. We'll do await request. Query. No, we need the endpoint. So we'll do process.env graph CMS endpoint. This is, yeah, this request, I don't think lets you set. It doesn't let us set the good old headers. So we'll do const graph CMS equals new GraphQL client. Then we'll pass in that graph CMS endpoint. And then we can pass in options here, and we'll say the headers this time authorization will be a bearer token, and that will be saved in our env. So we'll say graph CMS token. And then what we can then do is pass along the body, and then we can do res.status 201.json create bin, and we'll close this. So we'll import that, we'll remove that. So that, I think that's okay. We got a serverless function going on here, a little lambda on in here. So this is no longer the endpoint. This will be query. So we'll run this query, and we'll pass in the body. Now our body is just going to be the variables. Yes, what we should probably do is validate what's coming in here. So then we send we'll send across the things we need. But it is a video, it is a live stream. We'll not go into creating endless tasks. Let's just get the bare bones rolling here. So I think we are getting there. We'll now create the environment variables, if I can spell GraphCMS endpoint. And then we'll say I can't type on this keyboard, the MacBook, token. Now I need to get the endpoint from GraphCMS. Endpoint here, that's fine. And then content from draft and also mutations. Save that. Nope, I don't want to enable that. I don't want to enable that. That's public. We'll say this is graphical bin. Content from stage. We're not too concerned about staging. We're just going to use draft. Basically, with GraphCMS, what you can do is you can submit data. You can save as many drafts as you want. Well, you can save a draft and then publish as many versions of those you want. And everything's versioned, and it's really nice when you're dealing with data that needs to be controlled in that way. We don't. GraphQL bin token. We'll copy that. We'll paste that in there, and we'll close that out. I don't really care if you saw that token. We'll change it later. It's not an issue. Go back here, and we'll create a token. We'll create a query rather. We'll say hello. Now this is an endpoint for a GraphQL server on the left here. This can be any GraphQL server you want. The idea is we can click save and share, and then we get a request. So this makes a request to the save endpoint with everything, and we should be able to see what's going on. So I cannot spell process, so that'll be the problem there. And I somehow removed body, so I'll add that back in. And then if I click save and share, I get undefined as well. So what's going on? Let's have a look. GraphCMS is not a function. Did I do it right? GraphCMS authorization, await GraphCMS dot request. Now if I click save, we'll get another error, and we'll see what that one is. Only absolute URLs are supported. Okay, that is probably need to restart the server. To bring in those envs. It's going to go away. We click this, click that. Let's type in a query here. I should probably set a default value so I don't have to do this every time. Click save and share. So we're getting defined, but we didn't get an error. We got a 201. Cool. So that is saved to GraphCMS because we're getting an ID that is from GraphCMS. So we go back to GraphCMS, look in our content, and there we go. We get the data of our query and the endpoint, and we've got no variables, so that doesn't matter. And this is saving that content to, it's saving these bins to GraphCMS. It's using it as a database. Yeah, so it's shown undefined in that pop-up. Alert ID probably doesn't have the ID. Does it? Well, ID's there, so okay. So we need. I always forget this. I always forget. Then ras.json. we click Save and Share. And we get an ID. Hooray! So we get an ID now of our graphical bin. So now we've got this saved. The next step is to push the user to the saved bin, and we can do that by doing router.push that ID. Now if we go back here and click Save and Share, it's pushed us to that URL, and it's a 404. Well, this is great because now all we need to do is create a page similar to our index page, but this time fetches from GraphCMS the actual the actual bin. Okay, and we'll statically build these. We'll use a fallback, like a load and well, no, I think Next has a blocking fallback now, so we can do ID here, and then we'll import React from React. We'll import use a router from Next router. Then we'll do import request and GQL from you know what it is? What we could do is we could create a client and share that client around, because we're going to have to instantiate this client 3 or 4 times now. That's probably what we'll do. Let's not get ahead of ourselves just yet. Let's just copy this here. And we'll use this inside of an async function. And we'll say this is get static paths. And we'll do const bins equals await graphcms.request. We'll do query. Get all bins query. Then we'll return fallback. It's true. And we'll say the paths are going to be bins.map, and we'll destructure from that, and we'll return a new object with params and the ID. So we'll destructure from the bin the ID, and we'll send those paths. So now we just need a query for what was it? Get all bins query. We'll do GQL. This is a query to GraphCMS, not to our own endpoint. This get all bins is a query to GraphCMS. So I don't know what your naming conventions are. We'll just do this. So it's a bit, there's less going on. Now we've got those, we can do export async function. Get static props. We'll destructure the params, and we'll destructure ID from those params, and then we'll need to create another query. We'll say get bin by ID, and then we will create a query in here that accepts a variable. And this query will be get bin by ID. It doesn't need our queries don't need names, but I often find it helps. So you can do this, and we can say bin where the ID is ID, and we'll get the ID, the endpoint, and we need the data and the variables for those. Now I'm trying to think. What we'll probably do here is we'll say this is initial, because this was query, wasn't it? So this is probably where we'd need to do that aliasing, because we're going to render this inside of the custom Graphical. So it's expecting initial query and initial variables. So we'll do this here, and then we'll do initial variables as an alias for our variables column, field, whatever. So that makes sense. And again, this is a query to GraphCMS. So if we go back to here and we go to the playground, I'll open up a new tab. We should probably implement tabs, that would be cool. we go back over here. We get this ID. This is what we were pushed to when we saved the bin. And then we go back into here and we say, pass the ID. We'll just check that all this is rigged up. There, so we get our initial query and our initial variables. Then we can destructure bin. This data, we don't need to destructure data because that's what GraphQL request will do for us automatically. So we don't need that. Get static props. What are we going to do now? Think. We will destructure the bin. We'll make a request to GraphCMS.request. We'll pass in get bin by ID, and then those variables will be ID. Okay. Then we can do return bin. Then what we can do is we can do export default function bin page. We'll get the bin, and then do we need router on this page? Use router. Probably somewhere. We'll do custom graphical from component custom graphical. Then all that's left to do is spread the bin in, because the required props we've satisfied here. We don't need ID, so let's not request it. Bin page. I think we're pretty much there, you know. The one thing I'd probably handle is a 404 when the router when it just doesn't exist. So we'll do use router, and then we'll say we'll destructure the is fallback from. Well, no, the fallback's blocking, right? I don't know if we set if it's blocking or not. We'll have to figure that out. But we can say if there's no bin, then return. No bin exists with this. No bin exists. That's fine. No bin found. Whatever. Doesn't matter. So we don't actually need a router at all. So we can simplify that. I think we're there. Refresh. GraphCMS is not defined. Let's just quickly create a client. We'll do export that there. We'll do import GraphQL client from GraphQL request. Then we don't need to do that here. What we can do is we'll do import GraphCMS from the lib folder GraphCMS client. Then that's what we can make a request to. Why don't we do that inside of here as well? We'll import GraphCMS from the lib GraphCMS client. And we don't need to do this here. It just kind of simplifies things up a little bit. GraphCMS. Okay. This is like this. We must return bin inside of props, inside of get static props, because that's what Next expects. Awesome. So now this data here is coming from GraphCMS. The bin, the contents of the bin is stored. Now, what we should probably do is validate it's a valid query before you can save it. So if we save and share this here, and we go back to GraphCMS and I reload the content, I'm not sure which one this will be. There'll be this one here. Yeah, it gets hello as the data. It's probably not, because anyone could store anything in here. What we want to do is we want to store just GraphQL queries. But listen, how long have we been streaming? We've been streaming for 1 hour, and we've replicated a concept of GraphQL bin, which is pretty cool, I think. We've got Graph CMS as the back end, and then we've got kind of this custom graphical interface going on. So I think we're there. I'm just checking. Checking anything else. Cool. Well, I think we're done. We'll add an endpoint. Now, the one thing we don't have is headers. That's the one thing we don't have. We haven't got the ability to add headers. We haven't got GraphQL Explorer here as well. OneGraph's Explorer. That would be pretty cool. Just to give people the ability to use that. But my idea with this is that there's many times I've had to share the contents of Graphical. So say, for example, I wanted to run a mutation, add to item, input. I'll tell you what, let's go to cardql.com and just get an example query, or mutation rather. So we've got this add item. Let's just grab the contents of this. Now you'll see what I actually used to do, and what I still do to this day, is I would add the query inside of the arguments here to share, if I wanted to share a query with anyone. Now there's two problems with this. One is I've got to share this URL with the query string in, and that can go wrong. And second is, this is a query string on Graphical or GraphQL Playground itself, so you'd have to have a hosted version of their endpoint. Now, say this is the headless API that you have an endpoint for. Well, you just need to know the endpoint, and then you can share a query with the endpoint and the variables as well. So back here, we've already given it the URL. We should probably add a button to show what the endpoint is, but we can do that later. It doesn't really matter. And then we can just replace the contents of this here, and let's just say run that here. We'll prettify that, and there we get a response back. Now I can click save and share. It's forwarded to a new URL. Yes, the response is gone, but that's fine because we're sharing this. We could save the default response and make that an initial response, but we can run the query again, and anybody with this URL can then go and can share this. So if I refresh the page, I get the query, and it'll have the variables if I've got variables populated in here. So we're now able to just share, and all of that is stored with Graph CMS as the backend. So I go here and I get the mutation. It's saved. Now, granted, we can just treat this as a backend. There's no real need to log in here. But ultimately, what we've got going on is exactly what I was using with GraphQL Playground many years ago. Unfortunately, it's no longer around. So yeah, I think this is cool. It would be nice, this save and share thing, it would be really nice if this button could be some kind of plugin that knew how to make a request to save and then could return the URL. Granted, how the whole /ID thing works is specific to Next, but that could be cool. We could just say, okay, this is going to live on graphicalbin.com, and anybody can use it. It knows how to fetch it. It saves it in one central place. So yeah, this is cool. We've re-implemented this save and share. So hopefully this has been interesting. I had real good fun playing with this, and maybe we should deploy it, get this working, get it live. So yeah, why don't we do it? Yeah, probably want to change the token beforehand. So I'll deploy this and I'll add a link to the stream, and I'll upload the code on GitHub as well. Why don't we do that now? I'll just open another project and get the git ignore. And we'll do git init, and we'll add everything. We're not pushing that env up, but we could push that env up as env dot sample or something. So we graph CMS token graph CMS endpoint. Okay, we'll do hub create notrab slash graphical bin. Cool, and then we'll do git. We don't need a PR actually, we'll just do hub browse. So all of the code is on GitHub now, so you can go ahead and see everything here. And yeah, we can add to this what we need. Like, it's pretty cool. Yes, it's pretty bare bones. It's just graphical at the end of the day, but we're able to save and store content. And we have our index page, our API routes. We have our raw request there. Sweet. Let me just tweet this link out so I don't forget about it. Cool. Well, that's it. Thanks for tuning in. And hopefully we can do some more streams on this. We can add some more content around this. I don't think there's anything left to show. Other than I will go and deploy this now. I will get this live on a domain. We'll put it on graphicalbin.com where we can start to use it and start to modify some of the features here. So thanks for tuning in, and feel free to reach out, ask any questions, create some issues, add some features, whatever we want. We can use this. GraphCMS will happily sponsor the data that it stores, you know, as a community effort. You know, if we want to take this thing seriously. So yeah, let me know what you think, and go back, have a watch. And like I said at the very beginning, what we've created here is most likely due to change with how Graphical is going to implement themes and plugins and whatever as it goes forward. As GraphQL Playground and Graphical merge, we'll see some great changes, and hopefully we can reflect those changes here as well and make Graphical, you know, add this share button in. Maybe it just becomes kind of a plugin in the future. You know, we can create an API endpoint for it, host that endpoint, and then that button is just, it knows how to get the state of the query and the variables and pass those along. It's only all we need to do. So yeah, thanks very much for watching. Feel free to ask me any questions on Twitter. I'm at notrab. But yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed, and hopefully you've learned something. I've certainly learned a lot here. I learned that you can now inherit the behavior of the toolbar, and you can add additional content to it. Every single time I've created one of these custom graphical interfaces, I've re-implemented these buttons God knows how many times. So I'm pretty happy that I found that we can pass those as a prop. That must be new. But yeah, thanks very much for watching.